G'day and welcome to Inforunners. I'm XQ. Today I'm joined by Minion Soldier. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. Yourself?
I'm struggling. I got this new PC and it's giving me a bit of headache, but I'm getting there slowly. Getting things back on their feet, but it's definitely a massive improvement over what I had. So today, I'm going to go through with you what me and some of the other infrunners and our supporters have been speculating over the last 48 hours. And even in just the last couple of minutes, more stuff is coming in that are constantly changing our perceptions of this ship and new things that we've learned. And I'm going to go over those with you. And yeah, I'm just kind of want to get your thoughts, raw live thoughts as we go through them. So I'll switch this over to the browser straight away. And straight off the bat, we've got these really nice renders of the ship actually from Starjump or Grim from Starjump, who does the cinematics.
Hmm.
And he actually took the time to actually unwrap and texture the ship, and it's got some really nice details, which I really liked. And I just want to show off his images. I think he's done a really good job. But most of what we're going to look at today is here in the this is a Sketchfab model that someone obviously imported into Sketchfab, and it just allows you to look at a lot more details, and it also allows you to go through the model. And so, straight off the bat, I think we'll start with the really obvious one that I always come to was the wings do fold back. People would have seen photos of this. We picked up on this really quickly once we had this model because you can see these pivot points, and it allows it to have that stance of the Aurora. Yeah, so I think it definitely takes a lot of cues from the Aurora, and obviously these engine parts are from the constellations. So I guess initially, I'm just curious to know what's your thoughts, looks wise, on this ship.
When I first saw it, I was like, that's an X-wing and a U-wing had a baby, but
Mm.
in a good way. Like it's a very good blend, and I think it's a very good homage to both ships.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't disagree. I think they're going to sell an absolute metric crap ton of this ship, but based just on its look alone, and the other stuff that we're going to go into. I actually think it's going to be quite popular. I will say this straight off the get: it really is a Hurricane competitor. That is essentially what this is. So if you remember, the Hurricane originally was being designed as a heavy fighter, and then it became more of a medium light glass cannon. This
Hmm.
must be the thing that kind of replaces it, and I'll go through that and explain why. So most people think the way to get into the ship is the back here. One of the things that we picked up on, and I'll try to show it on camera here if I can, but you can actually see the three boxes. This is, if you think kind of like the cargo ramp on a Mustang, but it's for components, and the components actually go right down here. We're actually this is speculation here, but we're actually speculating this could almost be like a conveyor belt, and the whole thing kind of comes out and hangs back, and you can just do all your maintenance at the back of the ship. Really good placement though on the components, because probably the least, you know, hardest area to get to damage wise, except from when you're behind, obviously. But yeah, like some of the ships have had them on the top, and they've been in really bad placement. So yeah, so that the actual way to get into the ship, believe it or not, is more akin to the Anvil series of ships, and it's through here.
Yeah, yeah, like the Gladiator bomber.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of people have said, "Oh, this is the landing gear," but actually, it's this part here that's the front landing gear, and the side landing gear is actually more akin to the constellation. It's these pieces here, and if you can see the angle here of these pieces, when these wings fold up, they're going to be perfectly flat. So yeah, it's just like on the constellation. So, and if you actually look at the constellation and even the Aurora, they have long backlet, like long back skid-like landing gear, and then more of a short, stout front part. And you can obviously see it's also perfectly a triangle between the three. And that's a common theme too on the Aurora's landing gear. If you go have a look at that. So yeah, that's something that I think people like. I had some guy going, "Oh, they must be over here. It must be over here," but no, yeah, it's these parts just here. All right. The other really interesting thing is the guns are all size 3. So it's got 8 size 3s, 8 legs on a spider. This was formerly known as the Black Widow. Lore does actually make up is really helpful when you were trying to work this stuff out. So yeah, this is obviously I was talking to Paul earlier, and he's pretty convinced that they're gonna retcon the law or whatever you want to call it and change it so that this is now known what was formerly known as the Black Widow. Or they might even put something like it was codename Black Widow. You know, when they prototype ships, they have like the F-35 was originally called the X-35 and stuff like that.
Or they may come out with like a Black Widow edition of the ship.
Yeah,
You know,
that would be cool. I would. It's funny you mentioned
all
that
red with like a little. All black with a little red highlight on the body.
That's my
somewhere.
colors, man. If you haven't realized by my logo and stuff like that, that's my colors. So yeah, I would very much and one of the other supporters here, SA, is he's a big fan of those colors too. So yeah, would both be looking forward to that. It's probably the most excited I've been for a fighter in a while. Not gonna lie. It's like, and I like anyone that watches this show tell you is I'm not a component. Like I do not endorse people buying fighters because they're not going to hold their worth, but they're going to sell a shit ton of this shit, like an absolute shit ton.
Yeah.
Just because obviously it's got X-Wings vibes. And you were saying to me earlier, though, you really like how instead of the wings coming from behind you.
Oh yeah. Well, I like when I was looking at it, and like when I first saw the images, because I just like before we even did the show, I was just kind of getting these images kind of bleeped at me, like, "Hey, have you seen this? Hey, have you seen this?" And I just saw some very early stuff, and I just went, "I hope those wings don't fold like level with the body like an X-wing does, because if they do, yikes!" But the fact that they kind of fold all the way to the rear, that was I mean, yeah, it's perfect. I like the way they've done that, and the fact that it's a heavy fighter. I mean, primo. What
There
a
is
like no meme that is such a good job.
Well, there's no reason you still couldn't push these wings together, so it is a little bit like an X-wing folded. But
Yeah.
the default park position is obviously back. I actually did have an image open and I closed it, but yeah, there is an image floating around. I will try and do it on the fly if I can. Just give me some time. This is how unprepared I am. Yeah. 2 seconds. I'm just trying to find it.
It's okay until you messaged
Got
me
it.
and you said, "Oh, what about the Scorpius?" I had to look it up, and I was like, "Oh, that's the thing that people have been showing me." I was like, "Oh, okay, okay. Now I know the
Yeah.
name."
So yeah, like you can tell just looking at this from above, it's so Aurora-like. It's yeah, it's kind of crazy how well it looks like an Aurora. Yeah, I just love that they managed to take design cues from the other ships and fit it in so well. So yeah.
When I look at the engine pods, I see a constellation, though. I have to. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that has
from
to be
behind.
fit.
A
Yeah.
100%. But that's what I mean. Like it's got cues from the other ships in the lineup really, really well. But yeah, totally. This is a constellation here. If you look at, it's even got the little traily bits at the back and stuff like that. One of the things I do like about it though is a lot of the maneuvering thrusters are actually on the body. They're none on the wings or anything like that.
Yeah.
You could actually blow a whole wing off with the current flight model, and it'll still fly because it's got another wing. So you could essentially
Yeah.
probably, like, as long as you blew off the same two, it'd be a bit weird if you did it on the diagonal, but it would still technically fly. And it's going to, some of the thrusters can be shot off because, well, that's just how, fighters are. They're all got that weakness. But yeah, it's not a terrible design. A lot of people, I've heard people worry about convergence on weapons, but that can always be tweaked. I think the big takeaway for me is I've seen a lot of animations, like there's an animation of this turret rotating. It doesn't rotate, and I'll explain why right now. First off the bat, if it rotated, you could hit the wings, right? But if you
Yeah.
actually look in here close, you can actually see it's almost like a track on the actual thing itself, and we know that this is a track that this goes backwards and forwards on. So these are gimbaled gimbaled guns on like a fixed turret that doesn't move.
Yeah.
And so basically they're almost like, you know how they talked about partially gimbaled, where they kind of only face forward, they can't really turn extreme left and extreme right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what this turret is. And naturally, if you actually run this turret backwards, when it goes over the edge, it's automatically facing backwards. So it doesn't need to rotate, if you think about the full mechanics of how the ship would work. And so, yeah. What's your thoughts on that? On a turret that basically slides backwards and forwards?
Well, I mean, when I looked at that, I was kind of like, my question was, what's the practical reason that turret slides backwards and forwards? And I thought, okay, maybe it's module access, maybe it's something else. You know, the way it parks and folds up, maybe they did it for that reason. But I mean, I know that some people are worried about convergence and whatnot, but like you have to remember that the convergence problem, technically they sort of fixed. I think it's now like 2 years ago, because I mean, there were ships like the Drake Buccaneer is an excellent example, like because it had all these guns spaced out over the wings, and so none of the shots were landing in the same place. So like guns were going everywhere, and so CIG kind of soft made it so that when you have fixed guns, they do kind of toe in, they do kind of aim in a little bit, so everything more or less lands in the same spot. And so I've never been really all that worried about the convergence problem on that, and I have to assume that those guns are at least partially gimbaled in that way.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Yeah, I think a lot of those problems can be worked out down the line anyway. It's a kind of a bit superfluous to me personally. I do also think it's going to have good visibility over ground as well because of the, you know, the constellation like styles front end. I have heard a lot of comments that it looks a lot like an anvil ship with the front missing, and I do see that. But also the width of this, I get the Apollo vibe of the shape of the head of the Apollo as well. So I think the fixed missiles might be a problem. They're size 2 missiles. So yeah, you can't put extra fuel pods on or something like that. But the ship is actually rather armored, which is good.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't look like a wimp. I mean, and that's
No.
going to be the strong point. Some people will go and they'll say, "Oh, but you can shoot a wing off and you lose a gun." It's like anybody can say, "Hey, I can shoot your wing off." It's do it in the heat of the moment. That's kind of a different story, right? So I don't think that that's like a weakness in the ship. I think it's going to be like, this isn't a Drake ship that we're talking about. This is RSI, so it's going to be very resilient. I mean, this was supposedly up for a military contract. That's the lore behind it, right?
Yeah, so I'll go into that a little bit. So basically, from what we've heard from the law people that we have in our group, this was in the bid for the same slot as the F8 Lightning, but it got rejected because it was too expensive. So I'm kind of curious if when they go to pitch this ship to us, are they going to go, oh, it's better than the F8 Lightning? Because it's more expensive, so that could make it better, but the reason it got kicked back was it was more expensive. So, yeah, it's a kind of interesting conundrum. Like that they're going, oh, here's the F8 Lightning that you can all have for free. Oh, by the way, there's a better one, but you got to pay for it. So you can kind of see where I'm coming from there. So yeah, I'll go into a few little other things now. So we'll briefly just try and see if I can show you these components really quickly, but it might be a bit funny. So we'll see if I can get to it or not. Bear with me. So yeah, oh, there you go. You can kind of see the boxes and whatnot, which is what led us to believe that they're components. There is no internals for this ship, so it is going to be like the Hurricane or the Gladiator, where you just get in it and that's it. This has all not been laid out. You can actually see this is actually the external hull just coming through. There's your size 2 missiles.
Yeah.
So yeah, they really have not detailed in here a lot. And one of the things that came out on the roadmap today, I'll show you this real quickly as well, was this image here. Now, what was new that confirmed for us here on this image is if you zoom in here, you can actually make out a second co-pilot behind. So that actually was a really big question we had. Was it one-seater or two-seater? And for a long time, we were hoping it was one-seater, and when you send the turret back, it was like an automated turret that, say, shot at whatever you had targeted. But this literally confirms that it's a two-seater. People can argue that that's photoshopped or whatever, but it's not. There are differences between the pilots, like different helmets and stuff like that. So, yeah, so it really does put it in line with the Hurricane.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing of it is like, you know, when I was talking about you don't know why the turret, like I didn't know why the turret was going back and forth, but when you add the second seat and you think about it, it's like, so the pilot can be fighting to the front, whereas, and he's got 4 guns, and the co-pilot could be fighting towards the rear of the ship, and he's got 4 guns. That makes it very interesting. I mean, that opens up a lot of interesting possibilities, and I have to assume that when the co-pilot isn't there, the pilot has control of all the guns, or at least can flip a switch and take control of all the guns. So
Yep.
that gives it a very interesting selling point, you know, against something like the F8 Lightning. And also, I mean, we don't know when we're going to get the F8 Lightning, but if this has a delivery date because it's on the roadmap, maybe, then yeah, that's a huge incentive to sell a whole bunch of these things.
Yeah. A lot of the speculation, not just by us, but by other people, is it's going to be like the Talon, and so it'll be out by the end of the year. We do know they're working on a few other RSI ships, which means they're working on that RSI aesthetic. Think about how the Mantis is already out, you know, things like that. So if they're working on that style guide, and someone's just messaged me and said it's on the roadmap for Q1 2022. So, yeah. So if it's on there, that's not that far off the end of the year. So yeah.
Yeah, that would be 317, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and that only went up on the roadmap today. So yeah, I do want to talk about a little bit about this ship and the ship behind it in the image, the Hurricane. I still think there's a lot of room open for the Hurricane because the Hurricane can do that full 360 spin of the turret, where this is literally only really forward and backwards because of the wing placement. So I still think the Hurricane is going to have its place. I don't think it's completely superseded. And the other ship that it's obviously similar to is the Saber, because it's literally just got double the guns of the Saber. And the Saber, I think to a lot of people, you correct me if you think I'm wrong here, Minion, is kind of like the real stable middle of the road ship at the moment. So I think, and I wonder, and I want your feedback here, will this ship be the middle of the road for the heavy fighters because of that same standard 8 guns that are all the same, rather than a mix and match approach?
I think what people will expect me to say is that the truth of it is, you know, when people look at fighters and they go like, oh, you know, it's got this gun facing this way, or like the Hurricane has the turret. People don't, like, sometimes I think they forget that, like, let's say you got 2 fighters going in a direction, either one of them can just decouple and bring everything to bear on the other guy. And, like, that can happen at any time. And that really changes, like, the validity of something like the Hurricane. Like, I think the Hurricane would have been a good pursuit ship for maybe something that's a little bit more sluggish or difficult to maneuver, but against another fighter, even a heavy fighter, I don't know. I think that really kind of what you're looking at is the first of probably a few heavy fighters. Like CIG probably realizes that this market is massively underserved. And when when we get Pyro and we get other star systems and people want to visit all these places, all those little small ships, like the inconveniences or just having to switch to the smallest quantum drive or the slowest quantum drive to have the fuel to go to these places, it's going to be very inconvenient. You're going to start seeing, like, people aren't going to get rid of their Sabers or their Gladiuses because they're terribly they're poorly maneuverable or they don't have enough firepower. People are going to get rid of them or just leave them in the hangar to rot because practically they're just not as useful as the bigger ships. And truthfully, The bigger ships have enough of what you need that you're never going to look back.
You essentially need another ship to get those ships to where they need to go, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. I also think in regards to the heavy fighters, we've only really got a few at the moment. So we've got this, the Ares, and the Vanguard, and that's it. Oh, and the F8 that we don't actually have, but we know of. So, as you said, it's definitely a market that is not tapped like the other medium and light fighters. But again, if you think about if you're making a game and you're trying to maximize your revenue, that your earning potential, you're going to do the best ships last, generally speaking. So that's why we haven't seen many heavy fighters, because, and almost if you think about how they come out, like we had the Vanguard, which is that really versatile modular ship, and then we've had the Cap Killer. You're almost going in order from worst to best to try and maximize the profit, which is also why they try to do the things with CCUs to stop us from swapping stuff as well. So, yeah, I can see a lot of people buying this ship. For me, I'm going to pick up a CCU. I'm going to pick up a CCU from whatever's real close and sit on it. And if I really love it, then yeah, I'll get it. And I recommend the same thing for everyone else. Get a CCU and sit on it. But don't jump out and buy a whole ship, because until you see it, we just don't know. There's still a lot of little unknowns there. There might be some real restrictions issues with the turret because it can't rotate. So you'll have to wait and see. And it clearly can't rotate, because if it rotates, it hits the wings. So I'd love to see someone say I'm wrong, and then and explain to me how it works when it can go through the wings. But yeah, all right. Is there anything else you want to add? I think we'll kind of wrap it up there. That's pretty much covered everything I wanted to go over. Unless there's anything you want to add.
I get the feeling, like, if I'm going to make one of my predictions, I get the feeling that this ship is probably, it's going to sell respectably, but I think that where it's really going to sell is in the CCUs, because people are just going to be like, oh my God. And like, you're going to see a lot of hangar fluff get melted and basically turned into the ship. Because
I wouldn't be... I was going to say,
like I said, it's an underserved market, and everyone's going to be jumping to get on something that's actually going to fly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in regards to what you're saying about the CCU, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't have a War Bond discount CCU for this type of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Wouldn't be surprised.
They'd be nuts to not.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I probably will mention is we've talked about price backwards and forwards, and it's probably been a really hard thing for a lot of people to agree on. But it looks, this is the consensus. So there has been prices outside of this window, but somewhere between 220 to about 300, and that's based on things like the price of the current other heavy fighters, with the Harbinger being the most expensive at, I believe it's 290 or 295, somewhere in that bracket. And then as low as, the Vanguard Hoplite at 235 and stuff like that. But there are a lot of ships around the 220 price point, and they like to gather stuff together so you can't upgrade. So it might, I would expect it to be more on the high end of the 200s. But you just can't tell with
275. I would say 275 minimum,
which puts it in price with the Eclipse.
Yeah, because you look at something like this, just flat out weapons to weapons. This trounces a Vanguard. They're gonna price it above a Vanguard, because you just look at it, 8 guns. All size 3s, but what can you do with 8 guns? How can you mix and match between distortion, projectile, all this stuff like that? It opens up so many doors, and they know it. Like, this is not going to be a cheap ship. If anyone's thinking 220, I think you might want to check your dosage.
Right after we record this, me and you are going to have a discussion on the Redeemer. So I think we'll leave here now. If you guys, I remember hashtag Jaden in the comments below if you like a chance to win an F7A upgrade and Super Hornet. Unfortunately, Eric Lanz has passed away, and his mate is looking for a new home for his former ship. If you like this type of content, if you dislike it, that's fine too. Got no problem with that. Let us know your thoughts below on the group speculation and what you think. I've looked at a lot of other people's speculation and some are on similar par with us and others are not. So I thought it was time just to bring out a video and share our thoughts with you guys. But yeah, I've had about 10 people on this for 2 days. So yeah. All right. Minion, where can people find you, by the way?
They can find me on the YouTubes, man. Minion Soldier.
Yep.
That's
ranting
it.
and raving.
Exactly.
All right, then. We'll love you and leave you, and we'll catch you in the next one.